The election of 1800 brings in a new era for the Americans and our government and how Jefferson will handle running our government compared to how George Washington and then John Adams ran our government. The election of 1800 was very unique. First of all, you had Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr both tied for the office of president. Remember, this was before the 12th Amendment was passed, so it went whoever had the most votes got to be president and second most votes vice president. This is going to be an issue, not because they were from different parties, because both of them were Democratic Republicans, but it was an issue, and it eventually has to go to the House of Representatives, and they cast vote after vote after vote to see who will become president and who will become vice president. It continued to be tied and tied and tied. It eventually falls on Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton, even though Hamilton and Jefferson did not see eye to eye on our government or what our government should be, he trusted Thomas Jefferson much more than he trusted Aaron Burr. So he is going to persuade some members of the House to get this vote broken, or the tie broken in Jefferson's favor. So Jefferson does become president with Aaron Burr as vice president. Now that is going to cause major problems for Alexander Hamilton and actually leads to a duel between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, where Aaron Burr actually kills Alexander Hamilton. But this whole issue will be fixed once the 12th Amendment was passed. Now this was a huge, huge milestone for American government. Basically, the rest of the world did not believe that a peaceful transfer of power could go from one political party to another, because in most other places it had never happened or never worked. But this is going to be also called a revolution of 1800, because it was the first time in history that a peaceful transfer of political power went from one party to another without there being any type of major coups or other problems. So remember, it had gone from John Adams being a Federalist to now Thomas Jefferson, a Democratic Republican. When Thomas Jefferson came to office, he's going to bring a much different philosophy on government. He believed in laissez-faire, meaning hands-off. He did not want almost any federal government intervention. He believed that states should have the most power and that they should be able to basically run their states as they saw fit. So he is going to run things much differently and in a much different way than previous presidents had. So you see here all of the different things that he tries to undo that previous Federalists had enacted. Now, judicial review. This is going to be really important. John Adams, right before he left office, he sat up basically the last night in office, and he wrote out all of these judgeships. He appointed all of these Federalists, obviously, and he basically left them on his desk to be delivered. Well, when Jefferson takes office, he refuses to have those appointments delivered or recognized because he didn't think that it was appropriate or fair. One of those judges winds up taking it, and it goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the court case is called Marbury versus Madison. With John Marshall ruling as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time, that's this gentleman here, it winds up establishing a very important principle for our federal government, and we do see our federal government get a little more power here, extension through this process of judicial review. Because what this court case does is it's going to declare parts of the Judiciary Act of 1789 and 1801 unconstitutional. And it is going to establish that principle of judicial review. You really need to know and understand this, because what this says is that the court can declare laws to be unconstitutional. So again, another very important check and balance that was established by our Constitution. So judicial review says that the Supreme Court or courts can declare laws to be unconstitutional, basically voiding that law. The United States was very interested in expanding. We had basically been interested in expanding since our founding, and that was going to be really key. We were really interested in trying to buy the port of New Orleans from France. We were extremely interested in this. Jefferson, being a big-time agricultural supporter, wanted to have that so we could ship our goods out much easier for those Western farmers. But he sent some ambassadors to try to work out a deal for this in France. And when they get there, at the time Napoleon was the ruler, Napoleon was very short on cash. So there he is going to offer, he was hoping that he could get some quick money to continue his campaign in Europe. So he's going to offer the entire Louisiana to them instead of just the port of New Orleans. Now, this was going to be really key because they had no idea that this was going to happen, but this turned out to be the deal of a lifetime. It comes down to just a few pennies an acre. I think we paid $10 million for that entire piece of land right here that more than doubled the size of the United States. This was really important, and here's the really key question now. Thomas Jefferson, being a strict constructionist, meaning he did not believe that you can do anything that was not specifically written in the Constitution. Well, purchasing land was not anywhere in the Constitution, but like any true politician, Thomas Jefferson is going to make a concession and buy that piece of land anyway because he felt it was for the good of the nation. Now, once he buys it, he knows he's got a sense of people out there. Lewis and Clark are going to be the two who were chosen for that expedition. This expedition lasted 2 years, and the purpose was to gather information about the West because we basically had no idea what was on that piece of land. They are going to start over here. They wind their way back. They actually go all the way to the Pacific coast just to see how far and what was there too before they make it back. Now, they did have a really important Indian guide named Sacagawea. It is pronounced different ways, but she was key to their journey. She was really important to help them navigate the area as well as to establish good relations with the Indians that they encountered along the way. So this is going to be a really important expedition that they go on. But once again, we're going to continue to face conflicts with Native Americans, and just like we had in the past, we make unfair treaties, and we also break every treaty we ever make with Native Americans. So that's nothing new. Tecumseh is going to be a Native American who attempts to unite all Indians to fight against the white settlers. This is going to be unique in that he tries to get different tribes to work together to fight against them. Unfortunately for Tecumseh, it does not pan out. It's probably too late to get this to happen, but he did try to do it because he is defeated at the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811 under William Henry Harrison, who goes on to become president. That's William Henry Harrison you see in the picture. He becomes known as a very famous Indian fighter, but he's going to be really important to Tecumseh in that, again, the Native Americans are still fighting to maintain their land. So again, even though we are expanding, it's not free open land. We were taking it from Native Americans. Remember that even though Britain and France were at war, the United States had declared neutrality. We wanted to stay out of this, and the biggest reason was because we desperately needed trade with both France and Britain. Our New England area was dependent on trade. Well, what was happening is that the British specifically, both sides were doing this, but the British specifically were doing something called impressment. And impressment is where they were forcing U.S. sailors into the British Navy. They were making the accusation that they were actually British sailors that had deserted, but in reality they were Americans, and they were being forced into the British Navy. We saw this as a huge insult and an act against the United States and our sovereignty. But we really weren't sure if we wanted to go to war, at least specifically Thomas Jefferson. So Jefferson was looking for a way to make Britain stop without going to war. So he's going to pass the Embargo Act of 1807. You probably want to add that date there. So this Embargo Act, an embargo is where you refuse to trade with a particular country. In this case, it was Great Britain. Unfortunately for Thomas Jefferson and the United States, it winds up hurting the U.S. more than it does Great Britain. Great Britain just went somewhere else for their goods, whereas the United States, we really had no other options as far as our trading relationships go. So this is not going to work. It's a big failure. So that is going to really hurt and push more Americans to wanting to take some action there. So that's going to be where your war hawks, or people who really wanted war with Great Britain, come out. And one of the reasons is because they were hoping we could gain more lands, because at this time, Great Britain controlled most of what is now Canada. So they were hoping we would be able to take that piece of land. We also wanted revenge because the British at this time were helping the Indians and encouraging them to attack our settlers who were out west. So that was going to be another reason that they were really pushing for this war with Great Britain, because we've got this really hunger for more land, and we really don't like what they had been doing.